welcome back to Beyond the Ballot. Our voice, our choice. Beyond the Ballot is a series created to educate Black voters about their rights and to give them all of the information they need to be an informed voter about Issue 1 here in Ohio. On this episode, we have Bree. She got together a really cool group of young people from our community to talk about their next generation of activism and what that looks like. Let's see what they're talking about.
So thank everyone for being here. We're all here to talk about reproductive justice and what it means to be a Black voter in this time frame. And so I guess we'll just go ahead and get right into it. So what has your experience been as a young voter?
I say my experience as being a young voter has been one of a long road of education and also one of kind of confusing because there's a lot of different sides and a lot of different, voices to hear from. So it's just finding what knowledge works best for you, finding out the truth, and then how you can affect your truth or make your own truth from what you've learned.
I respect that.
Yeah, I would agree. Just like there's always times that we're told to vote or how to vote, but not exactly what that means or really explaining each side. So I would just agree with what Carter said.
I would say the same when it comes to both of those. Also for me, voting is something that's so personal, just knowing the history and the fight for Black people to have the right to vote in this country. So going to the polls and me being able to do that for the first time was something that kind of transcended me. It was kind of doing something for not only myself, but my ancestors who didn't have the same opportunity.
Pedaling off of what Sherrod just said, for me, being somebody who is an immigrant, voting was kind of the way I finally realized part of my American dream is not only being able to immigrate here, but participate in the very institutions that, I stand to benefit from. So it was great being able to vote for the first time.
Yeah, just to tie in what everyone else said, voting for the first time or being able to figure this out has kind of been difficult, just figuring out how to do it, how to go about it, the logistics. Especially considering my first time voting was in a state I didn't grow up in, so figuring out how to transfer all my information. But I just think the power that we get from voting and being able to exercise our voice and support what we agree and believe in is something that I'm really happy to be able to take part of.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing. As far as Issue 1 goes, what are some ways or why is it vital to actively fight against, the restrictions on reproductive justice?
I think it's really important that we talk about the autonomy over your body. I feel like there's a lot of what you should or should not do, but I think having the freedom over your body, knowing that as women of color, that we're more likely to die in this process, 3 to 4 times more likely than anyone else. It's important to know your right and why it's important, and just even the fact of just being criminalized behind it. It's just so many reasons socially and economically why it's important for us to have that.
I think it's important for us to be able to exercise our own power to make medical decisions about ourselves and not have politics come in the way of that. So if you want to do something with your body or if you don't want to, you should have the right to make that decision, especially when it comes to our health care, and you shouldn't have to go through barriers and obstacles that are preventing you from doing that.
100%. And then just being an ally in this space, personally, I think it's an absurd issue that we're that's on the table that we're discussing right now. And I just want to be able to show support and just learn about why this even come into play in the first place, or what kind of thought process came behind it, and how can we shut that down for the greater good.
I think that the issue, with Issue 1 and just reproductive rights in general, it being set up in this country has been navigated from men's perspectives and men's perspectives on health. So having conversations like these, where women are sharing their experiences and being open and honest about their health experiences in a system that was not set up for them, I think that further shows the importance of the legislation behind Issue 1 and all of the health, outcomes and all of that goes around it.
All right, well, thank you for sharing. I think that this is a table full of millennials and is it Gen Z or Gen X? We don't know. But, we're just in this social media era, and I guess my next question would just be, how do we use our social media platforms to show up, bring awareness, speak out?
From my experience, I'd say social media is a really good way to start off with getting information. So if it comes to Instagram and seeing somebody post about Issue 1 and then doing your research from there, figuring out what you believe in and support, that's a good way to start, especially when it comes to figuring out navigating voting itself for freshly 18-year-olds or things like this. using our platforms on social media is a great way to spread awareness and information on how to go about voting and how to make informed decisions on what you believe in.
Very, very well said. I'm trying to think of the cherry on top for that.
I can think of a single cherry, but to add to what you said, we find that social media is increasingly becoming the most consumed form of media for, people who are growing up in this more modern technology age, whether we have any Gen Zers in the room or not. I found it interesting that teenagers these days don't even go to Google stuff, they go to TikTok to look stuff up. So if by using our social media, we can not only engage them, but provide this information in non-traditional spaces, then we can reach and target people who we never reached before.
Yeah, I fully agree with Amina. And social media functions as something that's intergenerational. And so I think just for me, even being exposed to social media for the first time around 13 years old, that's the first place outside of my home where I was exposed to being around how to vote and all those things. And it was something that I looked forward to as a young child. And so also just being able to bridge that gap between older generations and younger generations, and everyone being able to have that fuel for excitement around voting, and you're exposed to that through one platform, is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And just meeting people where they're at is what I would add. Just people are not just turning on the news every day in our generation, so being able to have that access with the click of your thumbs.
Well, this is a pretty similar question to the last one, but as far as, using social media as an influential tool to actually mobilize and engage people. So I guess with that, if we could just kind of reiterate or kind of narrow down some different things, because like you said, if they're not going to Google, I'm going to Google, but they're going to TikTok, I'm not going to TikTok. But it's the different generational gaps between that. So I guess for me, I'm just how can I go home today and tell my 13-year-old daughter how to be an activist regarding this? What type of ideas would I throw out there?
I would say that no matter how small, almost all of us have an audience on our social media. Right. Whether you've got 10 followers, 100, 1,000, you've got somebody that's watching your stuff, unless you're creeping, okay? But I would say it'd be utilizing that platform that you have, no matter how small the reach is or the number of people is. I feel like by just posting something, one post, one story, it's gonna disappear after 24 hours. If you reach a certain demographic within that, then I think it's productive in helping pass issues like issue 1.
Yeah, I would fully second that. I think especially as a parent, just some of the conversations that I've had with my mother, with her raising me, one of the things that she always doubled down on was the power that my voice holds. So from me being 5 to 19 now, recognizing that same power still holds true regardless of my age. And that same power, my voice is still utilized on social media, so recognizing that exists within that medium as well is a very good tool to have.
Awesome. So how can social media influencers initiate or participate in campaigns or support the cause? Because like you said, you make your posts, you make your story, but what about the next day? What about the next week? What about the next month? How can influencers really use their platforms for good? Not saying they're not, but
I think educating themselves first. I think a lot of times people want to jump in and start having really in-depth conversations without really educating themselves. So I feel like educating themselves first and foremost, and then explaining it in terms that is understandable for everyone. Using common language is really important for influencers, and not just taking what you heard someone else said or heard a politician say, but really breaking this down into terms that people can understand and that your followers can relate to is really important. And giving both sides, really just educating yourselves and your followers on both sides.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that influencers, or at least when I think of influencers, typically have a larger audience or a large range of people that they can meet. So making sure to use that platform to provide resources, education, even promote events and protests and things like this are great for influencers to do, since they're reaching so many people. And instead of just going out and reaching a few, they're it's like a ladder or chain effect, I guess, reaching so many that can continue to reach more and more in order for people to find their way to vote and things like that.
Yeah, I'd say a large thing with influencers. I know that it's a very deep industry, but like the proximity to things sometimes is not there. So kind of through education, making these kinds of issues, especially like as men, if it's a male influencer, making it something that's closer and more personal to you, for you to be able to have not necessarily the courage, but to be able to have the competency to be able to speak out and like educate your following. Because a lot of men I know just feel like this issue is not something that pertains to them, but they do not look at the women in their lives, the uterus owners in their lives, and the various people who hold this issue so near and dear to them simply because we don't share the same bodily organs. And so I think just making it more of a personal issue and utilizing men as well as a tool to be allies and show up the way that they're supposed to, outside of regardless of what society's looking at them for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can I add on to that really quick? Because you was about to talk, I feel like it's
Nah,
about
go
to be a
ahead.
segue. I was gonna say, how does it feel as far as being a man or not a uterus owner or a birthing person, whatever you would like to call it, like how does that feel being in this space as far as talking about these things and, the people that are like, this is a woman's issue, and it's like, no, this is a human person issue. How do you, navigate that space if you want to start there?
How do I navigate the space?
I added this one.
I would say just like Shirai said, make it personal to me, knowing what I hold near and dear true, and also being an influencer or being a community member, just getting out there. And then if you use your platform to reach your mentors and the people who have more leadership, and then you keep this cycle going until you get the message that you want to hear from the community that you're a part of, and get it to the mainstream audience, and then make sure that you're serious about your messaging, everything is stern, so that your words can't be twisted by fools. And I'm really poetic, but basically
Great word.
But basically making sure that your message is coming from your heart, and then making sure you're actually putting in the effort or the drive to make what you're saying heard.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Carter. I feel like basically we can boil that down to knowing your why. As an ally who shows up in different spaces, my biggest thing is always knowing why I'm in that space. Not necessarily taking up space for me, but taking up space for the people who do not have the privilege to be in the room. And so I think that's the biggest thing as an ally that you have to do, especially as a man when it comes to these issues, because there are so many women and so many uterus owners who do not have the ability to speak up because of the situations that they're in. But as men, we do have the ability, and we do have the predominant voice in society. And so it is our job, it is part of what is written for our own humanness and for the humans around us, to stick up and to advocate for each and every single person's rights.
And then just to add, because since we're cooking right now, I gotta add some ingredients. Just to add to what he's saying is, you see in like advertisement and social media, sometimes we can have negative stereotypes based on gender or race, and we just want to show the true identity of who we are. So kind of like what a toxic man is, and what a modern man is, like what we're trying to do in the community. So just making sure that's known, and that the negative image or the negative perception of us, we're killing that off as much as possible.
I respect that. So how can we make sure that the message reaches beyond our immediate social media platforms or beyond our proximity? Like, how do we go home and from here and talk about this or bring awareness in that way?
Light bulb. I say, for me, I would say unity is my power. So whenever I'm trying to be too much by myself or a solo act, I feel I'm getting weaker in my education and kind of my service. So service above self is kind of how I live. And one of the ways you can affect or make change is you can join a focus group, and then based off of that focus group, you identify your skills and you contribute to the group, so you can get back to your platform. You share what you've learned and what you're accomplishing, and then you just keep growing. And then another way to accomplish that is we could just do funding. Even just if you have a couple extra dollars after your paycheck, just donate to the right cause or donate to the people that are making a difference. If you might not have the resources you need to be a leader in the space quite yet.
I will also just add to that, showing up to events and posting about events that are in the surrounding areas for like young voters, or coming to places like that, getting yourself more educated, but definitely like sharing events and just following different places on social media and making sure you're sharing that out, and using your hashtag, using your SEOs, and so it can touch a multitude of people.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Also, just wanted to add on to there, having more talks like this, of course, definitely. I think that, we've gone beyond we kind of talked about it earlier, but we've gone beyond the knocking on doors and calling people. Like, we got to talk about it, like a real conversation. So I just appreciate everybody's, feedback and things of that nature, of course. And I guess now, what type of creative and alternative forms of activism can young people get involved in? I mean, we already mentioned the new era of social media, and just in general, I guess I'm just kind of thinking from my own mom perspective. I'm just like, how do we get them outside to even think about what's going on in their little phones in their rooms or on the couch and stuff like that? So what type of things can, the youth do, like come together? What type of ideas can they come up with to actually speak out and use their voice outside of social media or the phone or the couch? Not shading my daughter, but I'm just like, it's not only her. I'm just like seeing the different dynamic of, growing up and not having those, you had to go ride your bike to your friend's house, and now they don't even want to drive. So it's a little different now. So
I would say something that I've been noticing that we've been excelling at in this generation is creative expression. We have more lyricists, artists, I guess influencers, and just different career paths that we've never even thought of in years prior, and then they're making such a difference now. So just taking a step to step outside yourself and use your creative expression for something bigger.
I think also a very important way to tap into what young people want, and like recognizing those ways in which to like bring intersectional experiences into their daily lives, is to not only help your children to further understand their gifts and their benefits, but to make that intersectional. So if you have, for example, if you're good at public speaking, if you're good at communicating, recognize these the ways in which in your own community you can communicate and advocate for people just from the very skills that you are innately gifted. And so just being as a parent, as a leader, and having that role, and it's such a passive role that you can instill, of when your child's talking about something, when a young person's speaking about something, breathing life into them, versus that's not important right now just because it may not be important to you. But that's how you build an activist, is to support their activism, and is to support their voice. So
And I agree with what both of you have said. I feel like, generally speaking, people do have the older generations do have a view of not necessarily wanting to burden the younger generation with some of the issues that we're facing, whether it's just being protective or simply not thinking that, okay, this is an issue that the youth need to deal with, adults will handle it, kind of leads to like a stall of information exchange. I feel like the older generation needs to not only provide platforms and listen to the young generation, but is to actually learn from them as well. Of course, as the youth, we are taught to look up to our elders and to hear what they have to say, but I think it's high time they start listening to what we have to say and learn a thing or two from us, because we have some valuable inputs as well.
How can we encourage our peers to be more politically active outside of, the traditional ways of, like we already mentioned? I guess for what I'm really thinking of with this one is just, there's two men here, that's great, but how do we get other men here at the table? How do we change perspectives, or how do we, add something to that as far as moving forward? Because it's not, like I said, it's a human thing. It's not just a woman thing. So how do we get our peers to advocate for ourselves and each other?
I think when it comes to people that aren't already involved or don't have the information yet, and having to get them involved, it just starts with having simple conversations. Opening the door to have these conversations, talking about different issues, being able to talk about issues that they may think are taboo or things like this, and just acknowledging that these are conversations that can and should be had is the first step. Because once you open that door, that opens the door for them to communicate with other people, and the communication can continue and more people can get involved in this activism.
Yeah, I think fostering places of belonging when you're having those conversations, not judging people, having like a more curious, open mindset over like judgment. I think when you're having conversations and people don't know as much and you like throw a sense of judgment in there, it makes people revert. They want to shut down. They don't want to have these conversations. So in order to have more people involved that may not know as much, I feel like really fostering like curiosity over judgment and really fostering a place of like belonging and open-mindedness in these conversations with our peers.
And breaking the stigma.
Yeah,
in general,
literally.
There's still a big stigma on a lot of things, and this is definitely one of them. So I can definitely see that.
I would definitely add to what Naima said. I think when a lot of people discuss just political issues in general, they don't recognize them as human rights issues. And so taking something like the ballot, like issue 1 is on the ballot and it's something that we're gonna decide in a vote, but also think about and recognize the humanness that exists within the verbiage and the language within issue 1. And how are we approaching that best? Because I think that makes it a lot easier for people to digest, because we're all human, and you're able to just relate that to yourself. Like, what are the rights that I would want? What's the access that I would want if I was in the other seat? So just being able to have that awareness, I think, and bringing that to people's attention and making it not a political issue is something that is a good thing to tap into.
Absolutely. Just to kind of go by what you're saying, I think that you kind of have to let people know, hey, if this passes, this is how it's going to affect you. This is how it's going to affect your mom, your sister, your aunt. We have to push forward a message that's not only educational, but relatable as well. So when you find out that the more you educate yourself, you see that reproductive rights are women's rights and women's rights are humans' rights. So when you think of a issue as monumental as issue 1, and you think of the fact that do we want to set this precedent that taking away these rights from women is okay, not only across Ohio, but in the Midwest and the country as a general. So I think we really need to get the message out that this is something that is not just affecting women or people with uteruses, but something that has the socioeconomic effect and health-wise effect and so many other intersectional effects of this issue, is just driving home that importance and letting people know that you don't have to be a uterus owner for this issue to affect you negatively.
Yeah, and recognizing also there's only 21 other states in the United States that have actually passed issues like this. So recognizing that we're in the minority on this, and kind of just looking at the political scope and the awareness scope of America, and going from there, and moving in a way that is progressive but not shameful. Because a lot of people do want these things to move forward, but don't necessarily know how to get them on the ballot in their communities, and don't necessarily know how to speak about them in a way that is digestible for the average American.
And then Amina, I noticed you said driving it home, and then I'm a visual thinker, so when you said driving, I thought of bridge, and I think we should start bridging these issues into people's personal lives. Kind of like, okay, you may see this on social media, or you may see it in your classroom, and you might brush it off the first time, but if you keep seeing it in different aspects or hobbies of your life, you're more prone to learn about it or face it when it's there. So I think we should just, I don't want to say put it in people's faces, but just let them know, hey, this isn't something that's coming and going. You need to pay attention to this.
Mm-hmm. We got to be consistent in our messaging.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I think that's definitely part of it for sure. So as far as does anyone know of any youth-led organizations or anything that focuses on voters and it's been talking about reproductive rights? I guess we're just, really trying to bridge the gap, between building that collaboration and then solidarity. So that's really just a two-parter. So if you do know of any, of course, share. But if you don't, kind of give us an idea of what that might look like, or how do we even build that collaboration to get the kids or youth, involved in general? It's not just kids, it's youth.
I'm a member of ACLU OSU. So basically, if you guys are not familiar with the ACLU, they are pro bono lawyers and attorneys from around the nation who work on cases like this. And so basically at OSU, we have a campus action team. And so our job is we table and we educate people on the verbiage around issue 1, the language that extremist legislators have tried to use to make people vote in different directions than their desires. And so basically we just educate around that. But I know there's just within a lot of Columbus communities, there's just a lot of reproductive rights organizations that really drive these messagings very, very hard. And also, I am an alumni member now of the Franklin County Youth Council. And so we had a lot of these conversations from a mental health perspective. So if people would like to tap in that way as well and support those, I think those are perfect ways to do that.
Man, there's a couple. And then for those watching out of town, you gotta come visit Columbus. We're booming down here. So I'd like to give a shout out to Zora's House. They've done a lot of great work, also doing a lot of woman-led leadership. I also like to give a shout out to Columbus Youth Council, funded by the Columbus City Council. And we mainly focused on different the issues at hand, how to be effective in the community, and how to make our local government listen. Also, Divine Nine, I need them to hear us as well and kind of do their part some more. We're in a weird process right now, but I'm the current Capital League president for the Columbus Alumni Chapter, and I just want to drive it home for my boys to really pay attention to this more and bring it home to their parents so that they learn more about it. I'm gonna keep talking. I got one more because I know there's a bunch. And then I like to thank kind of like my mothership, Ubuntu Leadership Institute. It's a leadership program, and we focused on how to become better leaders, how to become more empathetic, how to become more informed. And then something I learned from Dr. Robert Murphy, who was kind of like a giant here in Columbus on the education space, is you can control what you say, what you think, and what you do. And I think that's something we could drive home from this conversation.
Awesome. All right, so what specific call to action would you like to make to young media influencers? You know, what can we do or say to inspire them? What can they do or say to inspire us? How can we take action?
If I could say one thing to influencers, I would think it would be to acknowledge what issue 1 is saying and how it's going to affect people. It isn't only about abortion rights, it's about birth control rights, it's about pregnancy care rights, termination rights. It's affecting so many more people than I think people acknowledge. So if influencers and people with large platforms could push this information out there to make sure that other people can realize how this issue affects and doesn't affect people and how extreme it is, I think that's something that can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I would say, because each and every single one of us in this room are influencers. And so we all have an audience, whether we know it or not, and know what that niche audience is, but kind of tapping into that and discovering what that is, and then producing and sharing content. So if you share something, make sure that there's an action plan on how it's going to be executed.
I'd also say unite. We all have phones. We're all using these platforms. Why not just collaborate? And also kind of like how petitions work. We put all our resources and effort into one, and then we make a superpower.
Yeah. Pull up with your platform. You know, really take the time to educate yourself. And like Carter said, we're better together. So remembering that.
I would say that my direct message to influencers would be hey, I get it. You know, social media might be where you get your escape from reality from. It might be your, that might be how you make money. So it can be a little less appealing to post about these causes that are not really gonna make you any money. Who knows, you might even lose some followers depending on what your target audience looks like. I just want to drive home the message that issue 1 is that important. Even if it's not something that's going to generate additional traffic to your page, if it won't even make you money, lives are at stake here. Like lives are at stake here. So I just want to put out that message that like you are saving lives if you do put issue on your platform. So I think it's something we should all do.